Happy Wednesday, everyone. Welcome back to another Wild Calling Wednesday episode. Today, I have got on my good buddy, Ethan Escue. Ethan, how are you doing today?
Doing good, Jacob. Thanks for having me on here. I'm excited to kind of relive some stories today with you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm sure that we got probably a lot of crazy adventures coming up with you moving further out west now. And we got a little bit of our group of buddies spaced all over. And we tend to not do anything to the average level. We tend to take everything to the extreme. And I knew you were a shoe in for this series, and I figured I'd shoot you a text. Actually, you texted me first, and we were catching up, and I was like, "Hey, man, by the way, do you got any crazy stories or anything that's happening?" And you pretty much sent me like a few paragraphs worth of stuff just off the dome. So I'm excited to see what we get into today. I love hearing these things.
Yeah, when we talked about that, you're like, you spend a lot of time in the outdoors and in the wild, and you have any crazy stories, and they just started kind of rolling. And I'm sure I've got more that I'm forgetting or aren't coming off the top of my head, but I got a handful here. Then it's funny. Like sometimes you don't look back on these very often, and you just you just keep moving forward, right? But then every once in a while you reflect and you look back and you're like, man, the chances of that happening, or I can't believe that happened, or I'm really glad I'm still here after that happened. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I got a couple things written down here that have happened, and I'm gonna go through them with you kind of chronologically in my life. So, um, we're both fairly young, right? So like I'm 27. So really not all that old at all, but I have spent
Mm-hmm.
an immense amount of time over the last probably 10 years in the outdoors. And really, once I got to college and I was out on my own, it was just unstoppable, in the outdoors, in the wild, just always hunting, always fishing, scouting, kayaking, canoeing, backpacking, something. And that's produced some pretty wild happenings. So, I'm going to kind of start with some that happened while I was in college and progress kind of bigger and badder up to a little more recent in life.
Yeah. So to give a little bit of background on who you are, I'm sure a lot of our listeners here have heard you on different podcasts and stuff like that. But I really like to show our listeners that there's a lot of exceptional people that are going to be on this podcast, you included, in that. But there's a lot of like really average people that go through harrowing stuff and have amazing recoveries. One episode of mine that I don't know if it will have aired in order yet because we might air his close to Veterans Day because he's a veteran. But Jeremy Cavaretta, really, really kind of a normal guy, and he had an extreme aneurysm with his heart, and yeah, basically went to the point where he, you know, should not have been alive. Like the doctors were like, we need to operate now, and turn is like went from the point of you're not barely going to be able to jog again to running like 6 miles a day and doing everything he can in the outdoors again. And it's really amazing to see what these people have gone through and how many crazy adventures they've been on, especially given that they started as a normal guy, just like any other person listening to this. Um, Now, you not being a normal guy, I'd say, just give a little bit of background on where you're from and everything like that, and kind of what has led you to be so passionate about the outdoors.
Yeah, well, I guess the first thing I'm going to say is I do consider myself a normal guy. I think I'm a normal guy with maybe a slightly abnormal passion. That's how I would actually describe that.
That's
Um,
that's where I'm getting the abnormal from. It's your
I
passion.
yeah, yeah, I definitely think I'm pretty normal. So I guess kind of my high level summary of who I am. Grew up in West Virginia, so kind of a mountain state boy, mountain state, hill country. Just yeah, grew up, probably below middle class, and ended up going to college for mechanical engineering. Graduated with that. Just got a regular job out of school. I've had a couple regular jobs since then. Nothing ever too crazy, too special. Um, Nothing like months and months of time off work or this like incredible freedom to be able to go do stuff monetarily. Um, just an average guy, just an average kid that was like, hey, I'm gonna try to provide myself a good living, and did that. And then once I got to that point, it's like, hey, I'm really gonna leverage the time and the opportunities that I do have as much as I possibly can, especially at the stage in my life, to just take full advantage of it. So, my passion started at a young age. I mean, when I was 3, 4 years old, fishing all summer with my grandfather turned into being 7, 8, running around in the creek in my neighborhood, catching fish and crawdads and whatever else moved. And then, turned into 11, 12, 13, hunting squirrels and rabbits. And then I shot my first deer at 11. And that kind of changed my life forever. Little 5 point with a iron sight, bolt action 30-30. That moment changed my life forever. And I don't, I just think I fall more in love with it every year since then. Every single year, the passion grows a little bit stronger. It's also changed and developed over the years. I think every year it grows a little stronger, but it also grows a little more reflective. Each year, I kind of look back on what it's given me and the directions it's taken me in my life and the things that I'm extremely thankful for that I have and have accomplished and that I am because of the outdoors. And, I've really tried to make it a focal point of my life. And I'm proud to say that I think I've been able to accomplish that for the most part. Even being, like I said, a pretty regular guy. You got evenings, you got weekends, and you got a little bit of vacation time each year, and I really leverage it, maybe too much sometimes.
Well, you
But
do very well. I will say. I mean, to give some of our listeners um, a little frame in which to hold this in, and to understand that yes, you're a normal guy from the perspective you're working 9 to 5, you're an engineer, and you just made a big move to a new state last year, and now you're making another big move. And I believe was it $6 in 5 states last year for you?
last year I shot $4 in
Okay,
3 states, or no, $5 in 3 states. I forgot one.
gotcha.
Yeah, I shot $5 in 3 states last year, and then the year prior, I shot $7 in 3 states.
Yeah, and
Um,
this is on the schedule of a normal dude. And to give you a reference, a lot of the stories we tell have absolutely nothing to do with any of those kills, and maybe a little bit along the way of maybe a couple of those kills. So that'll tell you like all that Ethan has really seen in the outdoors is that he gets out there as often as he can, and those 2 seasons haven't cracked what you've given me as at least the top 6 of stories you'd like to tell of crazy cool things that have happened to you.
yeah, because that stuff kind of lives on the surface. It's like everybody looks at the deer you kill and or whatever, whether it be a deer, or an elk, or bear, or moose. Like in those just the last 2 years. I mean, there's 13 bucks that I just mentioned, bear, pigs, turkeys, just all kinds of stuff. Um, but it's the little things that happen along the journey that are just they don't get talked about it as much, and they probably don't get it talked about or reflected upon as much as they should. And we kind of had a little conversation about that before we started recording here. That's kind of the premise of this podcast, and I'm kind of paraphrasing the words that you told me. Um, is to kind of let those stories come to light and be spoken about. And it's, speaking about my own, I don't have anything written down here that's like just the most unbelievable life altering occurrence ever. It's just things that have happened to me in my pursuits that I look back on and I'm like, I can't believe that happened. Or, man, that was just absolutely miserable. Or that was really dangerous. So it's just stuff that, if you feel like even if it's not a good occurrence, you beat the odds to have it happen to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean these are the stories that like for me when I crack a beer around the deer campfire, Like these are the things I just can't wait to tell my buddies about. And when you finally get to make that out of state trip and go to see each other, see some friends you haven't seen in a long time, like these are the things like I love to share. Like um, it's always hard for me to think about them in the moment too. But this is kind of like a nice platform to be able to like really reflect and be like, man, what like if I had to like wow someone at a campfire, what would I say? And for you, I know it's not a beer because I'm pretty sure you can't drink beer, but
Yeah, I've kind of an allergic intolerance to beer. And that's
yeah.
legit. That's not just saying I can't drink.
Well,
That's
Ethan's
legit.
a big wine drinker. He's a fancy gal, but
Yeah.
I'm just joking. Um, but you have got some crazy stuff to talk about here, and so without further ado, and I do really like your perspective on it too, of enjoying the journey along the way, and to me, honestly, like most of the stories I tell about any of the deer around me right now, and whatever's out in my living room right now in man cave, has a lot to do with the moments that happened before and after, and those are the things I always find myself cherishing. And then my friends like to warn other people with the craziest stories to make sure that I don't loop anyone else closer to a near death experience. Um, but it sounds like you've had some near death experiences, and I don't know which order you want to go here, but let's crack it off with your first one.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm gonna try to go, semi chronologically just in life. The first one, this is like the most classic thing ever, being shot at, right? So I'm
Yeah,
in
you're
college,
classic, like your average hunt, right?
right? So, I'm in college at the time, and I was just starting down the path of kind of the what I'm gonna consider my really serious journey. Where I really kind of took things to the next level when I started branching out, hunting new properties. Um, this is kind of the time frame when I really got into e-scouting, hunting public land, and just expanding my net. But it was just at like such a mediocre beginner level at the time. And this was a late season hunt in December. If I remember correctly, I want to say that it was an antlerless season. So I was just going out to try to shoot a doe, and we were going to do this little deer drive kind of around a small lake. And I went around the backside of the lake, and I think it was me and one other guy as like the standers, and we had some buddies making the loop to be pushers, right? And the thought was to there was a lake, and then maybe a 200-yard wide strip of timber, and then a field. The field was private, but all the timber and all the lake area was public. And our idea was maybe to kick some deer up, and they would come right through that kind of big wide funnel between the field and the lake. So we get over there, and before we even like get set up, a four-wheeler comes driving through the field, and he's kind of driving back and forth, revving his four-wheeler up as loud as he can, and kind of doing burnouts and stuff. And I'm like, okay, he sees our hunter orange, and he doesn't want us hunting. We're like 200 yards at least away from the property line on public, and we weren't shooting towards his property or anything. But I was just like, yeah, he's just ticked off that we're close by, or he's just warning us not to go in his field. I don't know. And then about that time, gunshots start going off, and literally, I hear bullets flying like. I don't know. Have you ever had a bullet go like right by you?
Yeah, I mean, I have some horror stories of Wisconsin gun seasons, but like I always hear the zing like when it
Right. Yeah.
comes right by.
That. Yeah. So I just start hearing, well, I can hear his rifle going off, and then I can hear these bullets just flying right by me and my buddy, like really, really close. And it was just a direct open shot between him and us. I mean, there was some timber in the way, but clearly the bullets were making it through because they're going past us. So we just like hit the ground and ran away. And, you know, we basically just ran away and got tucked up in a pine thicket and just made our way out of there, called our other guys, and we're like, hey, do not wrap around that pond. Just back out. We'll go hunt somewhere else. So, that was like, I was pretty young then. I think I was maybe 19 or 20. And
How many times do you think that guy shot at you?
I don't know, maybe 5 or 7.
Wow.
And I don't know if he was like trying to hit us. I would
Yeah.
like to think that he was not trying to commit homicide over us being 200 yards from his field. Um, but regardless, it's like it's not like he didn't know we were there, right? He drove around flying his 4-wheeler, revving it up. We're wearing tons of Hunter Orange. He sees us, right? And then he's, casting high power rifle rounds in our direction. So just a terrible experience. And, that's one of those ones. It's like, it's pretty crazy, but unfortunately, it's not like the most crazy thing you could spell up, right?
Right, right.
I'm sure it's happened to plenty of people before, unfortunately, again. But it's one of those ones that I look back on. It's like, even if that dude's not aiming at you, like, what if it ricochets off a limb or something and one of us gets
Right.
hit? Like, what if I'm not here talking? What if my buddy that was with me isn't here? It's like, you look back on little stuff like that and you're like, man, I just wish I wasn't in that experience, because that's one of those ones that doesn't come with any like thrill or excitement, right? Like, I've been in
Mm-hmm.
some hairy situations that's like, well, that's kind of part of it, like this adrenaline of like being out there and doing this crazy thing. We were just trying to do a deer drive, shoot a doe, and we ended up getting shot at. So that was just an unfortunate experience. But that's probably like the first really crazy thing that ever happened to me in the outdoors.
Yeah, I've never had a landowner shoot at me. That's just the fact that there's some level of ill intent there too is I mean it's gross. And like you're saying, unfortunately, there's probably some other guys that have experienced that just from the I mean, people get really really serious about like I mean, you were in proximity land, but it's probably more the fact that you were hunting. And it's just kind of disgusting that that's out there nowadays. But I've had people in deer drives when I was sitting in a stand shoot and bullets go past me. I actually had a buddy. There were some squirrel hunters like opening day in western Wisconsin, and they shot. I think he said they shot the tree he was in, but they just were not looking, behind them at all. He wasn't wearing orange because it's bow season, but um, it is freaking terrifying to have actual bullets go past your head and know that like any chance or like you moved and he didn't expect you to be moving or something like that. Like that could be it. That could be lights out.
Right, exactly. And like you said, the ill intent, that's a good way to put that. It's just kind of disgusting, like you said. Um, yeah, that was like probably one of the, I don't know, that's like the saddest one for me to look back on. That there was another individual that's gonna, cast live rounds towards, two college kids just because they're not on his property, but kind of somewhat close, doing something perfectly legal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was my first crazy one. And then, so the first ever, what I'm going to call like big hunting trip I ever took, quote unquote, big hunting trip. So I'm in college. I'm dead broke. I've got no money. I'm not hunting out west. I'm not applying for any species, any states. I'm not even going out of state whitetail hunting at this point. I don't have a lot of time, right? Like, you don't have vacation from college. You don't, it's strictly weekends and maybe a day or two of hooky throughout the fall. So I had this idea. I wanted to go to Maryland and hunt Sika deer in the salt marshes surrounding the Chesapeake Bay. Tags weren't that bad back then. Um, Back when I went, it was kind of like it was just hitting the crest of like extreme popularity. I think now the quality of that hunt has went down quite a bit from people I've spoken to because it has been dramatically popularized. But back then, I think you could have a pretty decent experience. So, and I had a buddy that lived pretty close to Sitka Habitat over there that I went to school with. So we were like, hey, we'll stay at your house. You know, we'll scrounge up all the gas money that we can pull out of our poor college bank accounts, and we'll go hunt these things. So kind of traded some favors with some buddies as far as notes go for classes and required attendance and whatnot. And anyways, I scrounged together a 5-day trip to go hunt these things in the peak of their rut. So we're over there and we're hunting them. And to kind of paint a picture, if you don't know what a salt marsh is, I guess imagine like any other marsh where it's just this big expanse of vegetation on top of like essentially a floating bog is really what it is. So, but this is like way bigger than any marsh I've ever seen in the Midwest or the North or anything. I'm talking like miles of just marsh, and it's all phragmite grass. So it's 7 to 12 feet tall grass, and it's just like impenetrable. And you got to be really careful not to like step in sinkholes and that stuff. But anyways, we get to this area and we pull in at the parking area. Nobody's there. We hike in, like we're there super early because we're going as far back as we possibly can in this piece of public. So we get there just ridiculously early. We hike way back in there. Before dark, we get set up in our trees, and sick of deer, they bugle just like an elk, right? So we're just hearing them bugle, and we're like, man, there's nobody back in here. Like they're bugling all around us. It was just sweet. The like sunset or sunrise came, and we weren't hunting together. We were hunting maybe a quarter mile apart, and on two different features. And like a little bit after daylight, this plane starts kind of buzzing us, like not not a passenger sized jet plane, but like a crop duster sized plane, but like a big, really big one, like to kind of give you a rough.
Bigger than a bush plane.
Yeah, bigger than a bush plane, but not by much, but like pretty sizable plane. And this thing is flying like low. I mean, damn. I was probably like 20, 25 feet up in a pine tree, and the bottom of this plane was probably, like not kidding, probably within 30 feet of the tips of the trees.
Oh my God.
And it's flying circles around us. And I'm like, we're texting each other, and we're like, does this dude like see us? Like what, like there's no way he sees us. We're in full camo in pine trees. Like there's no way. And and we're like, what is going on? And then all of a sudden he starts dusting us. So he's dropping this, at the time, this is what's going through our head. He's dropping this misting liquid down on us, and our eyes start to burn, and we're like coughing, and we're stuck in these trees. Plus, it's not like you can just run away, because he's like, imagine a crop duster, right? And he's hitting this whole area, and we're just like, we've got our shirts over our faces, trying to not get our eyes in it, trying to breathe. I mean, it was just like, what is happening? Like, so a long story short, he ends up kind of moving off, and we get down, and we're like washing our faces off with water. We meet up, we hike all the way back to the truck, and we get back to the truck, and there was like an A-frame sign put up that says danger herbicide dusting today on like this date. Well, we had beat that guy there, right? So he hung all the danger signs, or whoever hung the danger signs did it after we were already in that area.
Oh my God.
So nobody else went in there. That's why we didn't see any headlights coming in. That's probably why these stags were just ripping like crazy. And then, of course,
you had the most crazy overlooked spot that there could have been out there.
Yeah, just hunt under the herbicide plane. It's fine. So we ended up going and talking to, there's like an office that regulates. We did some research, and we found out like there's an office that regulates that. And we went and talked to them. We were like, what is this stuff? And I don't remember what it was, but it was some herbicide to kill some specific plant in the area that was invasive. And they were like, and we didn't really want to tell, because like we weren't supposed to be in there, but we also were like legit, we didn't know that, you know what I mean? It's like, right. We didn't want to tell them like, yeah, we were in there, because they've got signs all over right now that we're not supposed to be in there, but we got there before they hung signs. So
right, because then you have to explain it, and there's no way to prove the air beforehand,
right? Crap. So we were just like, what is this stuff that they're spraying? And they were like, well, it's so and so chemical. And they said like, I forget what they said, but they basically said like, you can't get it in your eyes, you can't ingest it, like it's cancerous. And we're like, oh my gosh, so we go home and we were looking this stuff up, and we're basically like, okay, well, if we start feeling sick, we'll go to a doctor or something. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do now, but so that's how that hunt ended up going the first couple days. Well, that was I want to say that was the second day of the 5-day hunt. And
Jeez.
the hunt ended good. I killed a stag and a hind. My buddy shot a hind. So we killed 3 in 5 days between the two of us. And that's like a hard hunt. I mean, a lot of pressure over there. It's a super, super unique hunt. Um, but yeah, man, I mean, just getting buzzed 60 feet above you by a plane and having herbicide dropped in your face is like, what are the chances of that? You know,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, that's freaking crazy, dude. I would think they were like looking for like a lost person or something like that, but even then, that's like you're so low. Like that's
well, yeah,
wild.
he was super, super low. I mean, that's why we were like, is this dude going down? And then we were like, no. And then the same thing, he's got to be looking for something or somebody.
Mhm.
But he kept flying over the same area. And then we're like, wait, does he see us? Like, is he? And then he turned on the jets and we were like, oh, crap, you know. And we didn't know what it was, but then all of a sudden our eyes were burning and like, oh, it was just miserable. It was so bad.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, like one stag and two hinds is worth cancer.
Yeah. I yeah, I've had no ill symptoms since. So like I said, I mean we were fully clothed and like as soon as it started burning us in any way, we were pretty both of us we weren't together, but we told like we did the same thing. Like we took
Mhm.
our outer jacket off and like covered our face and I mean it was just miserable. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that
Yeah.
like I don't know. I guess we'll see in 50 years what happens. But
Right, right. It was like, which is worse, the vaccine or giant dusting with herbicide?
yeah, so I mean, that was just, I mean, that's just one of those things. Like, what are the chances of that happening? You know, and it's like if we hadn't
Yeah.
been there so early, or if they, I think they should hide. I think they should hang the sign for that. You know, maybe a little more in advance, but
Yeah.
or send some, or not do it if you see someone parked in the parking lot there. So
They're just like, screw these guys. Let's hope they're in a
yeah,
tent.
like I don't know who's back there, but they're in for a rude awakening.
Dude, we got to get
Yeah.
rid of these plants today. If these plants go one
Yeah.
more day, like we are
If these
screwed.
plants are here tomorrow, we're done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, so
Oh man.
that was another college one. Yeah. And then I guess like sticking with the chronological thing, you know, when I was in college, like I said, I was in the outdoors all the time, but it was always kind of close to home, even like the public stuff. It was always
Yeah.
stuff like within an hour of where I went to school, and most of it was within like 30 minutes, and it was really nothing was like super wild, super crazy. But those were just like two just crazy occurrences that happened while not being in like crazy wild places. When I got out of college, I really got into kind of more adventure stuff, adventure hunting, adventure trips. I got more into backpacking and taking on mountains and traveling across the country. Uh, but the next thing that I'm going to touch on was just something that happened in my home state, and we did this float trip. And this is a funny
Mhm.
story. I mean, like amongst my like close friend group back home in West Virginia, I mean, this is like the most infamous trip we've ever been on. So there's a
I'm
section of
assuming
river.
something goes extremely wrong because that, I mean, that's like
Oh
all
yeah,
the best stories.
oh yeah. So yeah, so there's a section of river that goes through the Appalachian Mountains. Um, I think it's like 16 miles through this big canyon that winds down through the mountains. So it's not like crazy far for a float trip, but it's far enough to be like, I mean, on the eastern half of the United States, it's pretty remote. I mean, there's 16 miles with no roads, no access out of the canyon, nothing. It's just wilderness essentially. And my best friend's dad, he's like, man, I've always wanted to float down through here, you know. So we're kind of like, let's do it, you know. So, and we've done other float trips. Like we're big fishermen, and we like to canoe a lot. They've been to Canada a bunch with canoes, portaging way back in for 10, 12 days. So they're like, well, yeah, let's float it. So he ends up talking to a dude that like knew about he had floated it. And he's like, yeah, he's like, it's an awesome float. The fishing is phenomenal. There's spots to like there's enough flat spots along the riverbed to pull off and camp along the way because we planned on taking about 2 or 3 days to get through the section because we were going to fish a bunch. So he's like, there's one spot that you got to watch out for. He's like, we call it the Devil's Rapid. And we're like, okay. We're like, how bad is it? And he's like, well, it depends on the water level, but like between this water level and this water level, it's pretty doable. So we pack our stuff up. We've got 4 guys, 2 canoes, and we just packed so much stuff because like the float trips we've done before, just like mile rivers, really no like some rapids, but nothing crazy at all. So we pack a bunch of stuff with coolers, chairs, tents, like Coleman grills, like really kind of glamping it, on a fishing trip. So
Yeah.
we pack all this stuff. So we drive down there. It's like multiple hours to get down to where we're going. And this massive, massive storm hits the area as we're pulling up. Just like massive. Like there was just like brown rivers of water coming down the mountainside because there was so much rain. We get down there in the evening. We put our canoes in, and just like instantly we're hitting rapids, and we're like, oh, this water's too high. It's too gnarly. But now we're already gone. Like we've left the vehicles and we can't paddle back upstream. So we're like, we're in it. Like we're in this for the next 3 days, no matter what at this point. So we pull off, we camp that first night. We mark the water level. We wake up, it's like 2 feet deeper because all the mountains drain into the river overnight. And we're like, all right, well. So we just take it, and for the most part, it came up enough to where a lot of the rapids were kind of like overfilled, and they weren't that bad. That river was just moving, man. And like I said, we were loaded down, so we're not real. Anybody that has any kayaking or canoeing experience, or especially whitewater experience, you have to be so maneuverable and agile to navigate through the rapids and around the rocks and the log jams and whatnot. And we just weren't. We were too weighed down. We had too much gear. So we're bailing the water out of the canoe through like every rapid. But overall, it really wasn't that bad. Maybe came close to tipping a couple times, which like you don't want to tip a canoe in a raging river full of your stuff, right? So it's kind of getting later in the day, and we keep thinking like we're supposed to pass Devil's Rapid today, and this whole day we're canoeing down this river, and people are coming by us in like full on pontoon like whitewater rafts. And we're like, what are we doing down here? Like, like guys are coming past us in kayaks with skirts and helmets on. And we're like, we're just floating in 16-foot Coleman canoes full of coolers.
They're just like saying a prayer as they pass you.
Yeah, they're just looking at us like, what the hell, So we're so nervous, and keep looking at our map. We're like, man, we're coming up on it. We're coming. Okay, yeah, okay, this is it. Like, there's this really long straight stretch, and then the river kind of hits a mountainside, and there's this like multi-100-foot rock cliff wall, and the river takes like a 90-degree bend, and it drops elevation there over about 100-yard stretch. And in that elevation drop, there's a bunch of big boulders, and that's the Devil's Rapid. You go from this like long, slow pool to just bam. So my best friend and I, we're the lead canoe. His dad and his brother are in the secondary canoe. We pull off because we're like, we're going to walk down here and look at this, and we might just like unload all of our stuff and portage the mountainside because that's probably going to be better than flipping, right? So
yeah,
if it's undoable. So we're pulling off, and this is like the most iconic scene in like our friend group between myself and their family. We're like, hey, you guys want to go check this rapid out with us? And his dad just paddles, looks over at us, and he just says, shoot or shoot. And they just go around the corner. They go around the corner, and like I said, you drop elevation, right? So we see them, they start to bob, and then they go like over the crest. It's like looking over a hill where you can't see right next to the hill, but you can see out in the distance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can see like 100 yards down the river. So they disappear, and we're like waiting. And then all of a sudden we see the canoe upside down, and then we see them floating, bumping off the raft, and just
Oh
stuff
no.
everywhere. So we could take off sprinting down the edge of the river. We get down there. Luckily, there was people down there camped out on the rapids, and a couple of them guys had kayaks, and they were able to help pull the boat out, pull the guys out. And they lost like half their stuff. I mean,
You guys
they
saved the
lost
drinks and the food, right?
the coolers. I mean, the coolers floated, but I mean, they
Oh,
lost
thank
like,
God. You
yeah,
guys
they
would have
lost.
really been in trouble.
I mean, they lost like hundreds of dollars worth of fishing stuff. Like, I
Oh,
think just a bunch of gear, and I think they lost like two spin poles and a fly rod, and just like, I mean, and there's the bottom of the rapid is a really, really deep, big pool that's real turbulent. So it's not like you're going to jump down in there and swim it and grab that stuff. And I think they lost a chair too. So I mean, it was just like catastrophic. So what we ended up doing was we didn't do a full portage. We uh, we took our stuff out of our canoe and portaged like the gear around. But then we're
mm.
like, oh, we're lighter now, and we're like, I think we can get through it. There was not a shot we were getting through it. We got like
Shoot or shoot,
six
bro.
feet.
Shoot or
Yeah,
shoot.
we get like 6 feet into it, and I've never flipped a canoe. Like I've grown up on canoes and boats and kayaks, and I like just it's just kind of second nature, like the way to move with water now. And it was for all of us, and we just got into this rapid, and it just sucked us up so bad, flipped us over instantly, and now it's like we got to ride the whitewater out, and we end up getting down there. The canoe got pinned on a rock for a second. Luckily, it became dislodged, and then it's like we get down to the bottom, and then we get everything out. We're all soaking wet, and we start thinking it's like we still got like 8 miles to go. If one of our boat, if we had, if your canoe gets pinned around one of these rocks, like you can't get four guys and all your stuff out in one trip, and you
Yeah.
can't come back. You have to go all the way back, float the 8 mile. Like we're in the middle of the canyon, so that was kind of like in the moment we weren't really very respectful, I guess, of like what we were actually doing. We were just laughing about how underprepared we were because we were embarrassingly and grossly underprepared for the river conditions that year because the water was so high because of that storm. We've since done this trip again with different equipment, much lighter, and taking kind of a fleet of one canoe to haul the gear and then everybody else in kayaks. And we can get through some of these bigger rapids pretty fine. But that first year, man, I mean, it was just so ugly. I mean, we didn't stand a chance. We did not stand a chance. But luckily, everybody was fine. We did lose a bunch of gear. But that story right there, that's one of those ones. I guess it's not like a crazy occurrence, like a 1 in a million chance. It's just one of those
Dude,
things that's
like,
just like,
I don't know. That's the fact that you went and did it again too is like, yeah, you're
oh
not that
yeah,
guy.
yeah,
Like that
we've
you're
done
like,
it.
no, no, we can't take this for Mother Nature. Like we're gonna go back there and freaking get it. Like
Yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah,
That's
we did it Memorial Day weekend, and we've done that trip every year since that first year, except this year because I moved away, and I think they had a race that they were running in Memorial Day weekend, so we kind of called her off for this year. But since that first year, every year up until this year, we've done that trip again, and it's one of my favorite trips. It might be my favorite trip on the eastern half of the United States. I mean, it is
wow.
just it's incredible. To be honest, it's awesome. The fishing is ridiculously good. The sights are amazing. You're just like super detached for like a long weekend. It's nothing like super insane, but just a fun trip. But man, that it was just so funny. Like that first year, we were so grossly underprepared, and we had no idea. And those guys are floating past us with skirts and helmets, and we're like, what are we getting ourselves
Oh,
into?
that's the way it always is on those especially when you're like younger too, and it's like your first time in the mountains, or it's like your first time. Like for me, being from more flatland, like first time in the Rockies was just different. Like it's backcountry camping different. Like when you're dealing with rapid water, like very very different, especially when you went to do it in canoes. And
Right?
Man, you're lucky that you probably had those people pass you on the way down, because like they're like, yeah, we know right where to park to like grab some free gear and save some lives right here.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because that group of people that was camped there, they camp there every year. That's like a 30-year tradition. Memorial Day weekend,
Wow.
it's like a generational tradition. Like some old guys started it like 30 years ago, and friends and family have upheld it for like 30 years that somebody goes down early and sits at that rapid and helps people when they dump. Like it's that
Yeah,
nasty. So it's like it
that
was
is
pretty
so
cool because
cool
we
though.
yeah, it's super cool. We got to talk to them guys and just be like, learn the history of like them all. And I guess like there was 1 or 2 years where it was just one dude. Like he just went down there all by himself just to say the tradition was kept alive. And I was just like, man, that is like that's so cool. And like that's some of the stuff that like that's the stuff that I was talking about that doesn't live on the surface. You know what I mean? That's the stuff that doesn't get talked about all the time on podcasts and YouTube videos and stuff. But like that's some of the coolest stuff ever, that you have this family and friends tradition for 30 years. And there was a year or two where one dude was like, I'm going down there like 6 hours away, float 8 miles down a river and camp by myself for 3 days just to say the tradition lives on. Like that's the stuff that doesn't live on the surface I think is so cool.
Yeah, that is freaking awesome. I mean, I can see why you guys would want to go back to and have that kind of tradition too. The fact that you conquered it too. Like there's some trips that I've been on out west that um, had the potential to be fantastic and turned into a bust for whatever reason. And me and my friends have always sworn that we're gonna go back. And there's still one out there that we have not returned on that I've really just like can't handle. That's still out there and we haven't conquered yet. But that would be freaking awesome. And then to stay friends for that long too. That you got a good group of guys that continue want to do that. That's a blessing in itself, because any number of things could happen. It could be deaths, and sometimes friendships break apart for any reason. But those traditions, are what I think I cherish most in the outdoors, and creating them organically is just really special. But if you guys can't go back there and you need to make another trip this year, I know not many people have done the full Niagara Falls float successfully in a canoe. So I think that might be the next one for the crew to
We could
conquer.
be the
Cause
first. Yeah. Yeah. We'll have another podcast talk about that if we survive. That'd be
right,
funny.
right. I think we could get you like a paraglider. See if we can get you a little bit away from the rocks at the bottom, and shoot or shoot. So you should be able to
Right.
get
Oh
that
man,
trip
I'm
done.
telling you, the amount of times in my friend group that phrase has been said since that day. Shoot or shoot. We'll just leave it there.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because another SS little saying that's in mine is Sklenner shortcuts, and
Oh
the
yeah.
trip that we need to avenge yet was the birthplace of the Sklenner shortcut, and it was basically a few times that I've actually said the word shortcut in the outdoors, we've been immediately cursed afterward, uh, with just the worst experiences ever. But that's our shoot or shoot is the Sklenner shortcut. So I can't even
Yeah.
tell them that, hey, I think this route's going to be faster, because like I'm the guy with the Onyx that has to decide the route. So like I can't tell them like this route might be better. They're like, is it a shortcut? Is it a shortcut? Are you doing us right now? Like it's just
Right.
it'll be the end of me.
It didn't make the list, and I'll save this one for another time. But if you get a chance to ask our joint good buddy Jake Bush about the shortcut that we took in Montana that ended up on a knife ridge in the middle of the night with a wildfire. Just ask
Oh
him
my
about that
god.
sometime. Just ask him about that sometime.
I,
That
I
was
like having these podcasts too with like the people that you experience it with too. So let's hope that, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a time that we share camp together, or
right.
we can all hop on a call, of course, and that would be a great story to have on record. That's just that already
Yeah.
sounds crazy. I already want to hear
Yeah.
about it.
That was probably my first semi near death experience out west. But I'm just gonna skip over that one for today. Um, the first one I'm gonna touch on out west for me was on my first ever solo hunt. So let me paint a picture. So anybody that has solo hunted knows the trials and the tribulations that come with it, both logistically, physically, and above all else, mentally. It's truly a hurdle to solo hunt for an extended period of time. It's If you haven't done it, it's far more difficult than you have the capability to realize it is. And once you have done it, it is slow to get easier. Now, I've done it a lot now. I've been on a number of solo hunts. I just got back from one about a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Um, and they all carry their own little demons. They're just tough, like solo hunts. And it's a little different, like solo hunts, like a weekend hunt. Like last whitetail season, I slept in my truck solo hunting 2 to 4 nights a week for 6 weeks. 2 to 4 nights a week, I slept in my truck for 6 weeks straight. I literally lived in my truck the equal amount of time as I lived in my bed at my house, equal for 6 weeks, which probably led to me having such a successful season in Missouri last year. Well, undoubtedly it did. But that's really not that difficult because you've got self-service. You can talk to people. Your truck itself provides comfort, and it's short stints, But when you're backcountry solo hunting for extended periods of time, it is really, really, it's a grind. So rewind, I draw this mule deer tag, and I'm like, okay. And it was my first mule deer hunt, my first solo hunt. So I head out west, drive 2 days, get to the trailhead. I'm all alone. And I'm just like, this is crazy, man. So head in there, and I hunted for like, I think 4 or 5 days, and I never saw a buck, man. Like, never saw a buck. And I was just like, man, what am I doing wrong? I thought I had a good area picked out, and it looked good. And I ended up finding out because I left. So after like 4 or 5 days, I was like, man, I'm not seeing anything in here. So I left. I packed out. And I met this dude while I was leaving, and he kind of gave me some good info. He was like, that area he's a local. And he was like, that area is usually the best mountain in the unit. I mean, and he was like, those basins I told him where I was camping, where I was glassing from. He was like, dude, you did it right. I mean, like, usually that's the best area in the unit consistently. But that year was just terrible. The drought was really bad. He said that he thought the migration was a little different, like migrating back into the summer range for whatever reason. He's got some biologist buddies. I didn't know as much about mule deer back then, so I didn't really question him too much. I just kind of heeded his advice, and he told me there was one buck in there that was huge. I mean, big, like big mule deer. He showed me digiscope footage of it. But anyways, I was like, okay, well, I'm not heading back up in there. He was hunting that buck. He'd been hunting it for like 3 years. He's like, there's literally 5 deer in 6 basins this year. He's like, I've been up here every single weekend since June, and there's 6 deer or 5 deer or whatever.
Holy crap.
Where he said, like, on a normal good moisture year, good migration year, there's going to be like 25 or 30 bucks to pick through. That's just what he told me. So, but he said, go check this area out. This will be, he's like, I scouted it a little bit. There's a lot of deer over there this year, nothing crazy big, but I wasn't really being picky at the time. So I headed over there, and from a long distance, I glassed some multiple bucks. And I'm like, okay. And I was super beat down for those first 5 days. Like, first solo hunt, just like mental demons, physical challenges. I had altitude sickness, and just, I was kind of already mentally weak, to be honest, at this point. And I just like kind of pushing myself to just like try to hang in there. So I spot these bucks like 4 miles away, super far, and kind of across the range, like really far glassing. And I was like, okay, I'm going to backpack over there. So I've got like a couple days to chase him. So I get over there, I set up camp, and I was in this burn, right? And this burn was like pretty fresh. So every tree was burnt, the ground was burnt. So I was super careful to place my tent. not in the fall radius of any dead tree. And that night, I go to bed, and I'm about to tell you the story of the most miserable night I have ever had in the outdoors. A storm came through, and it was like a windstorm with no rain. It was like a dry lightning storm, right? So there was lightning and thunder with no rain. And the winds were probably, I mean, I don't know, they were over 50, like screaming wind. And I was glad that I was outside the fall radius of any trees because I was literally hearing trees fall. And I was like, man, if I was not careful with where I put my tent, I could really be screwed right now. But then what happened was the wind just kept getting stronger and stronger to the point where just imagine me laying in my tent and I'm spread eagle like a starfish with my heels on the bottom corners and my hands up above my head on the top corners of my little one-man tent, trying to hold it down. The carbon poles or fiberglass or whatever they are, they're like collapsing on me. One of them broke, and I'm holding my tent down from blowing away. Well, then when that pole broke, it kind of lifted up the vestibule a little bit. And what had happened was that wind was so insane and that burn was so dry and ashy that it was just like a dust storm. So
Oh,
I'm getting blown like 50-mile-an-hour winds. Well, I have like this dead airspace inside my tent. So it's kind of creating a vacuum effect, right? So it's sucking that ash in. So now I'm like coughing. I can't breathe. So I take my merino hoodie off and I'm just laying there shirtless. I wrap my merino hoodie around my face and just lay back, but I can't keep sitting up because my tent's going to like rip and blow off of me. So I literally wrap my hoodie around my face and I lay back down like a starfish and I laid there like that for 8 hours.
oh my God.
It got daylight. I watched it like I could see at one point the wind started to die down and I like took the wrap off my face. This was like over 6 hours into it though. I laid there with the wrap on my face, like barely breathing through my merino sweaty hoodie that I've been wearing for the last 5 days for 6 hours. And you know what, man? It got daylight and my body was like black just from the ash. Like it was just my face, my hands, my chest. I was just soot. And I was just like, I'm going home. Like it just
Yeah.
straight up broke me. And I look back on that now with a kind of a tougher mindset going into solo hunts, and I'm like, you know what? That was just one of those moments that you would have to be ridiculously strong, and I just wasn't at the time, and I'm okay with that looking back now. But that was seriously the most miserable night of my life, laying there like that for over 6 hours, just breathing through a sweaty hoodie, holding my tent down so it didn't blow away from me, and hoping, I was confident a tree would fall on me. That's the only positive I could think of all night. Lightning was crashing. I mean, dude, it was just the most miserable night I've ever experienced. I mean,
Yeah.
it
That's
was kind
insane.
of scary, but I was low enough to know I probably wasn't going to get hit with lightning in the tent. And
Mm-hmm.
I had been careful enough to be outside the fall radius of the trees. So I wasn't necessarily scared on that night. I've been scared on other nights in the mountains, but that night it was just pure misery. I mean, it was just bad.
Gosh, for 8 hours too. That is just insane. And yeah, I mean, you're exhausted. You've been hunting for, you've been hiking for days beforehand.
Right.
Jeez, I mean, and it's interesting too because that soot and ash, like when it's in the air, it actually can create enough friction to actually make lightning happen completely dry too. And that's like the stuff you'd see when a volcano's erupting or something like that. So you had to have just an incredibly dense environment of just disgusting, unbreathable air. Like I mean, dang near like you're in a wildfire.
Yeah, I mean, literally, especially because, like I said, that kind of dead airspace in my tent, it was just sucking it all in from that wind. The velocity was so high outside of the tent, it was just sucking it in. And I mean, to the point where, like, I mean, if it was dark, I mean, it was so bad that if I didn't do this, but if I had turned a headlight on and I stuck my hand out, I don't know if I'd have been able to see my hand. Like it was
Wow.
the air was literally that thick with just dust and soot and ash. And I've been in some like nasty, nasty stuff at work, right? Like I work in industrial settings as a mechanical engineer. I wear respirators in a lot of instances, and I'm just like, man. I mean, that night was just bad. It was it was miserable. So I packed up and I literally just walked away from Bucks. I had finally found them, and I was just like, it broke me. I mean, to the point where I was like super broken. I just headed home. 2 days drive home, and like looking back, I'm not even regretful whatsoever. Because I kind of gave up, but at the same time, I mean, at my like mental toughness capacity for solo hunting at that time. I mean, I was proud just to make it to that point, to make it 5 days without seeing a buck and not quitting. That storm, though, I mean, that was the most miserable night I've ever spent in the woods.
Yeah, I mean, there's like it's hard to call it a lack of toughness when you go through that. Like a 5 day grind of not seeing bucks alone. Like given that, like that sucks, and that takes a very very tough hunter to go through. But like then on top of it, getting no sleep for 8 hours, trying to hold down your tent. Now the thing that you were gonna live in the rest of the trip is destroyed. Like
Right.
you're full of crap. Your clothes are done. Like I mean, you could have gone like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator and like stalked up
Right.
on him with a knife, but like short of that, like you're you're not really setting yourself up for much success. And if not, you're kind of in it. I mean, I can't imagine that situation's very safe going forward. On top of it, you're at elevation and your lungs are probably trashed from inhaling that all night too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
no
Seriously.
matter how much your merino sweatshirt could possibly do, that is
Right.
just oh, that's crazy. Me and me and my fiance spent a night. We spent 7 nights in a row in the mountains in Wyoming, and we were at like I think we were at 12,000 feet. We had our highest elevation for camping, and we had topped a 13 and change mountain the day before, and we were at our last day, and we tucked ourselves into the corner of these like little pines in a little recessed area, and just the nastiest freaking storm rolled through, and it was like you're describing without the burn, but it was a rainstorm with hail that came down on our tent, and it was like 50-mile-an-hour winds, and it was just deafening. Like my ears were ringing from how loud the sound was of the stuff striking our tent. And it's just like you just sit and pray in those situations. I mean, not only did I bring myself into that, I brought my fiance into it. Yeah, at the time, girlfriend. I was like, okay, so like this is over for me now. Like
Right.
the second a ball goes through and hits her in the forehead, like I'm like gonna have to carry her out, and she's never gonna talk to me again. But thankfully that didn't happen. But those situations where you're just helpless, like you're not necessarily terrified because like mentally you're already there. Like you're physically and mentally there. Like okay, I'm just gonna have to do this to get out of here. But like that is such a sinking feeling to know that like at any moment this could just be completely south. And I mean, you don't know if lightning's going to strike one of those dry burnt trees and reignite that fire too. Like that could just be
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah. It was just a miserable night. I've rode out a lot of storms in the Rockies, and um, some of them have been just downright scary. But that one, like I said, it wasn't quite as scary. It was just, I mean, the level of misery was just, I would have 10 times rather it poured rain on me because I'd been fine. It's
Yeah.
like I'd had to hold my tent down, and I'd maybe get a little wet, like, because if it was raining that hard, but whatever, but that soot, not being able to breathe, that's what did it for me. It's just miserable. And that's the only storm I've been in quite like that. Um, just a dry lightning windstorm, like really unique. And, it's kind of like the variable of that stacking up on top of it being in that like extremely arid, burnt area. They just coupled together to be just kind of the worst recipe possible.
What a first solo hunt too. Like out of all the things that you can prepare for, like there's no one that's going out there like, yeah, let me grab my respirator on the way to the mountains in this lack
Yeah,
of oxygen already environment. I'm gonna have something that restricts my oxygen even more just in case. Like
yeah.
there's
Lack
there's
of
really
bucks
not
and
a lot you can do there.
lack of oxygen. Right.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that was a bad one. And then, so here's another one that's like the complete opposite side of the spectrum. So this is super close to my house. This is a semi-urban area. Um, I had just bought a truck and I had bought it out of state, right? So I hadn't changed over my, I still had like the temporary tags on it and everything from the different state. I come home like, the next day or 2 days later or something, I'm out hunting. And it was just an after work hunt right next to my house, like close by anyways, semi-urban setting and little tiny chunk of public that I've hunted before. And um it's kind of like not in the best area to say the least. And man, I was out there, and actually, I was not hunting. I was checking trail cameras. That's what it was. I was checking trail cameras at night, which I do often. But anyways, so I go in to check a couple trail cameras at night. I get in there, I check them all up, and I'm coming back out, and I've got a backpack on, and I'm just wearing like normal pedestrian clothes. I don't have like camo on or anything. I'm just got, I don't know, probably a pair of jeans and a black hoodie or something like that. So I'm coming out, and I get about probably 80 yards from my truck, 60 yards from my truck, something like that. And this dude stands up, yells freeze, and I hear a AR bolt get jacked, and all of a sudden I've got a laser literally on my chest. And I about shit a brick. I mean, I just put my hands up and I was just like, just started screaming, like, hey, hey. So, and he's like, he's trying to figure out like identification. Anyways, what ended up happening was apparently there was like a highly wanted criminal that had stolen a white truck with temporary Pennsylvania tags
Oh.
that was reported in the area that I was at. So he was checking out my truck trying to run my tags when all of a sudden he heard something and looks up, and I'm just kind of like, I was kind of moving quickly too because I was trying to get home. It was
Yeah.
like late. I was checking him pretty late, so I was like borderline kind of jogging back to my truck, and he sees me and just pulls up, just racks it, pulls up, and he's on me, and I was just like, holy shit,
Oh my god.
yeah. So I ended up talking. I was, oh man, I was freaked out, but he apologized, and I was like, man, I mean, I don't know. I just still don't know how I feel about that one, but
Yeah, that's terrifying. I mean,
oh, it was
I
scary. I mean, it was like that was maybe one of the most scared moments I've ever been. And like I said, it was in like the least extreme place ever. 10 minutes from your house, spot you've hunted for years, just the most happenstance thing ever led to having a laser on your chest with, one in the chamber. And I was like,
yeah.
that's one of those that's like, what are the odds of that? You
Yeah.
know?
And like I mean, you don't get what's going on for 1 second. You take an extra step and You don't know what's gonna happen at
Right.
that point.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh my god, that's
Yeah.
crazy. I
So
guess what I've learned from that scenario is like, if there's ever a guy that's really on a buck I'm after, I'll just say there's a fugitive in the area, and when he's walking back to the parking lot, we'll have a little
describe his
surprise
truck.
for him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. That is crazy, dude.
Yeah. That was, like I said, I mean, that's just close to home and like the last place you would ever imagine something wild to happen, but it did. And, and that's not even like it's outdoors related because I was out there checking cameras, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just one of those things that happens in life that you
Wow.
can't believe happened.
I sure hope that never happens to me, man, because I don't want to have to buy new pants.
Yeah, seriously. It's scary to say the least. And then on the flip side of scary, this was probably this is the last one I'm going to talk about for today. This was a more recent one. It was about a year ago. Um, I was on a mule deer hunt, a solo mule deer hunt, and I had planned to backpack into this area for about 6 days. So I had 6 days worth of food and I had 7 days worth of water with me because there was no water in this area. So my pack was like ridiculously heavy. But
Probably
that's
like
just
80
that.
pounds.
Yeah, more than that.
Jesus.
It took me 2 trips because I had to. So I packed. I forget how much the water weighed, but the water weighed. Don't quote me. I think it was about 45 pounds of water, but I did it in 2 trips because the first trip was like 65 pounds of gear and food and weapon and everything. And then I packed it back out, loaded up basically just water, about 45, 50 pounds, including like pack weight, and headed back in. And I was in there I was like, okay, I got 6 days of food and 7 days of water. If I end up wanting to stay 7 days, I can ration 6 days of food into 7 days, but I don't want to ration water. So that was my mentality going into it.
Yeah, yeah.
I get in there, nobody else hunting in there. There's no water, right? So unless you're willing to do the suckiest thing ever, which is what I did, you're not going to be hunting in there. I mean, you might go in there for like a day and then realize there's no water and leave. But mule deer, they don't need standing or running water. Like they can get enough water to thrive just from the plants they eat. Um, you can't take horses in there. Horses need water, right? So I wasn't running into any other hunters. And I was finding bucks, and I was finding some big bucks. So I was like, okay, I'm staying 7 days. I'm rationing my food. Well, on that trip, I got hit by a couple really nasty storms, and I had a glassing tarp, like for pop-up shelter while you're glassing. Completely forego that. I was like, screw this. I'll get wet. I'm collecting water because I was on big deer. And long story short, I ended up collecting about 6 liters of water from storms. And that gave me
Holy
about
crap.
2 extra days of water. So now I'm at 9 days worth of water, but I'm still at only 6 days worth of food. So um, I ended up staying in there alone for 9 days and never saw another hunter on 6 days of food. And I'm not a really big guy at all, right? Like I'm a smaller framed guy. I don't weigh that much. I don't have a high body fat percentage to begin with, just in everyday life. I lost almost 20 pounds in
Holy
9 days.
crap.
When I came out, um, I was kind of scary thin. Like,
Just gaunt.
yeah, I mean, I felt good. Like, I felt really good, to be honest. But I had lost like I lost a lot of muscle mass, and I lost like pretty much every ounce of fat I had on me. I mean, I was just skin and bones basically when I came out. But on the last day, this is kind of the peak of the story. So I mean, that alone, probably my most. I mean, it's definitely my most extreme hunt. Right, 9 days alone, rationing food. collecting water from thunderstorms, sitting through a thunderstorm inside a trash bag, trying to ride it out. Um, yeah, just wild, you know. So the last day, I spot this buck and make this giant push on him. I'm like, this is my last chance. And I get over there on him, and he's bedded, and he's got a spike, and it looks like a doe, but like that's just there shouldn't be one doe with two bucks that time of year. So I don't know if it was just like a button buck that had left earlier, a spike with just antlers so small I couldn't see them, or if it was just a doe hanging out with the guys in August. But anyways, I'm stalking this buck. He's a pretty good 4x4, and he's bedded, and he's on this big open hillside, and I'm moving like super slow, staying super low. The vegetation was about knee high, so I was able to kind of move somewhat concealed if I moved really slow and stayed as low as possible. But up there in the mountains, there's this plant. I really need to look it up and see what it's actually called, but I've encountered it in multiple states. And there's this plant that grows up high that dries out before any other plant. And when it dries out, it gets like crispy dry to where if you like poke it, it like explodes from being so dry. And it's so loud. It's so hard to stalk deer in that. And they like to live on the tops early season, and that's where this plant grows. So they kind of coincide. And I don't know, I think they eat it before it dries out, but I'm not positive on that. But the purpose of mentioning that is because of how loud that plant is. And I know exactly what that plant sounds like when you step on it or brush against it because I've blown stalks doing that. So I'm stalking this deer, and he starts to get nervous. And he's like looking, but he's not looking at me. He's looking like 20 degrees off to my right. And he's getting real nervous, and then he kind of calms down. And then he gets real, this is like over the course of maybe 20 minutes. And then he gets real nervous again.
Sorry to
And
interrupt here. What's your wind doing at this case?
so I was just getting ready to say that. So this is an evening stalk. So I'm checking my wind, and I was on the eastern slope, and the sun had already crested the top of the mountain. So I'm in the shade, the whole mountainside shaded. It's later in the evening. The downward thermal has already kicked in, and it has kicked in hard. Like it's not swirling at all. There's no swirl whatsoever. It's just winds going straight down the mountain. And I'm kind of coming from not straight below him, but not like straight side hill, almost like a 45 in between, kind of a 45 upward and over towards him, which is not a good stalk approach. Normally, I typically always like to come in above them with a rising thermal, but this was the last day, last chance. It's getting dark soon. I'm going for it. So I get into I was about 150 yards from him, and he stands up, and he stands up with a purpose, like stands up, turns full frontal, and like he's as high as he can, ears are pinned forward, and he's not looking at me. He's looking like 20 degrees off my right shoulder. And I actually looked back behind me because I was thinking maybe there's another deer or something. But the hillside was pretty open. Like I said, most of the vegetation was about knee high. There was some bushes that were maybe mid thigh, but like nothing over waist high, right? So I look back and I don't see any deer. I'm like, what? I check my wind again. Perfect. I'm like, what's going on with this deer? And he ends up giving like a snort or a stomp or something. I forget what he did, but he did something, and he turned around and he like bounded like 20 yards and stopped, and he looked back. And again, he's not looking at me. He's looking over my shoulder. And this whole time that all this is going, I'm not like in an upright position. I am crouched in like a half fetal, half downward dog position, trying to hide under this bush so he doesn't see me. So I just
Is
look
he
like
looking
this.
to your uphill side or your downhill side?
He's looking to my uphill side. Um, and then all of a sudden, I hear that plant. I hear this plant bust behind me. And I turn around, and at about 25 yards, I lock eyes with a mountain lion.
Oh,
So,
oh, that's worse than
so,
a gun at your face.
yeah, so as soon as I lock eyes with this lion, I instantly raise up, like, screw the deer, right? I raise up, and as soon as I raise up, he's like, oh crap, that's a human. So we were both just like bug-eyed, and he turns around and he takes it. It wasn't a really big cat. I think it was probably a pretty immature cat, like a 80, 90 pound cat probably.
Yeah, only enough to
Which,
kill you pretty quickly.
yeah, which would still mess you up. But it wasn't like a 150 pound tom or anything. But it turns around and it takes off, and man, I could see for probably 300 or 400 yards, and there was nothing above mid thigh. And when that cat left, I saw him for about a second, and I never saw him again. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I never saw a bush move. I never saw anything. And the whole time I was crouched, and and that deer was nervous for probably going on half an hour.
Oh,
So this whole time, I'm just tunnel vision watching him. He's watching this mountain lion that probably doesn't know the deer is there, that's stalking me while I'm stalking the buck. So and this is after 9 days of living out there without people, with no hunters, just so it's like, you want to talk about really, really feeling beyond immersed and like truly being in like the circle of life out there. Like, I'm literally stalking my prey while being stalked by a predator.
you were down a rung on the food chain right there.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, seriously. And he was probably like,
oh.
"Man, that dude's skinny right now. I could take him so easy." So,
He's probably been watching you for days. He's
yeah,
like,
he's
man, this
waiting for
guy's
me to
getting
get
skinnier by the day.
waiting for me to get weak, right? Yeah,
Right.
but I'm telling you, man, I think he was like 25 yards, like he was close, and I really believe in my heart that if he had not brushed against that plant, that he would have came at me, because he didn't know I was human, right? The way I was crouched and I was kind of in a bush, I think he was going to come and figure out what I was once he got there. You know what I mean? Um, and he couldn't smell me because
Right.
he was coming from an above side hill. He wasn't coming straight above. So he
And
was
that's
smart enough to be like, I've got the upward angle on you, but I'm also not going to let you smell me.
yeah. And
So
that's
it's
why I
like,
asked too, because like I was visualizing in my mind. It's funny. I was like, what would I do if I was hunting Ethan right now? And it's like straight downhill, like you were saying with you approaching that buck. Like it's you don't have the visual advantage. That deer's gonna be able to see you easier than you can see it. And, for your shot at least, it's gonna be more difficult. And if you're straight uphill or anything like that, like you're gonna be dropping your thermal right onto him. So like that cat was like, trying to be above you, have a visual on you where you couldn't get a visual on it. And then also not letting its own thermal dump into you, assuming that you were like every other animal out there that could identify it from smell pretty easily. That
right.
is just really cool. I mean, it's not that cool. Like it's
No,
pretty
it is cool.
terrifying.
I mean, I think it's cool. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't get attacked by it. That's the only lion I've ever seen. Um, super, super cool experience. And that hunt was like, it's my longest solo hunt. It's my longest time in the backcountry. I saw on that singular hunt in those 9 days, I saw mountain lion, black bear, moose, mule deer, and elk, all in those 9 days.
Wow.
Just living out of my backpack. Um, I also got dive bombed by an owl 6 times on that hunt, which was like just the strangest thing ever. I have a video of it somewhere. But yeah, this owl was it was before daylight. I was setting up for glass, and this thing just kept dive bombing me. And I was like, what is going on?
You like
That's
can't
probably,
hear him too. That's gotta be
what's,
creepy.
what's that?
They're so silent. You like probably can't hear him even coming.
you can hear them when they're like 8 feet from your face.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That was, man. I don't know. I ended up not killing a buck on that trip, but I was full draw on some a really big deer at 16 yards and couldn't get a shot.
Oh,
I didn't kill a deer on that trip, but for a lot of reasons, I would say it's maybe my favorite trip I've been on. Um, it's hard for me to say that like definitively because I love them all for different reasons, but there was just
mhm.
so much about that trip that's the only trip I've ever been on that I hit this point of immersion where I just felt like I was just one with like the animals out there, the
Yeah,
landscape. I mean, you don't feel like a human out there observing, right? Like I typically feel like that. Like you're immersed in it, but you always have this like internal separation. But when I got to like my eighth, ninth day, as it was kind of wrapping up, I mean, I was so ticked off that I was running out of food and water because I mean, I could have stayed mentally and physically on that hunt. I mean, I was in it. Like I could have just stayed till I shot a deer, and then I, I was just so immersed in everything up there after that
yeah.
time. And then the mountain lion, I just kind of topped it off. I was like, so I got stalked by that lion, blew the stalk up on the buck. It got dark like 30 minutes later. And I went back to my tent. I didn't eat anything that night. I didn't have any food left. I mean, I was literally out of food. I had a little bit of water left. Drank like half of it. Slept, and then the next morning I woke up. First thing in the morning, I packed up and just headed off the mountain. And I was like, man, that was the coolest 9 days of my life.
Wow, that's just so cool. I mean, I've been on I've been on some camping trips where like we planned meals to be trout, and we're living off of that, getting back to the truck with pretty much nothing left, and um, I feel like it's so different when you're hunting, like when you're taking part in the food chain versus like camping. Like I
Right.
feel like that's very different when you're not on trail, like you're getting off the trail, like you're stalking animals, you're watching them, like your whole purpose is to find other animals, and I feel like you have to act like an animal when you're doing that, and just being in the journey for sustenance as you're trying to literally survive as you're out there is really cool. I think it's as close as we can get nowadays to getting back to our roots of actually needing to kill to survive. And I
Right.
feel like every encounter you must have had just elevates that adrenaline so much. I can only imagine because I haven't done a solo backpacking hunting purely hunting trip in the mountains. I've done a lot of different camping trips like that, but um, knock on wood, I got a hopefully one coming up within the next 2 years here. But dude, that has just got to be such a crazy feeling to be that close to just primally who you were and how humans were designed for forever.
Yeah, and like I said, I've felt that way on a lot of hunts, but that hunt specifically that one was different. I mean, the feeling was just like this total immersion, like flow state. Like you didn't think about anything. You were just part of it. I mean, it was different. It was really different, and I want to get back to that on more hunts in the future for sure because it's the most perspective giving feeling you can have, in my opinion. So I really look
Yeah.
forward to getting back to that. Um, Maybe getting stalked by another lion at some point. We'll see.
Yeah. I think what we should do is we should start with you on one end of a mountain and me on the other end, and I'll just hunt you, and we'll see if you can kill a deer beforehand, then I'll stop. But
Yeah. Good luck.
yeah, I probably won't succeed. But no, man, that would man, you already got me thinking about putting some more applications in right now cuz
Yeah.
that
Kind of late in the
sounds right up my
game.
alley. No,
Arizona
I know.
closes tomorrow.
No, I know. The money is a challenge because I next year I'm gonna get married probably in I think it's a year and 8 days from now. So I gotta save some
Awesome.
vacation, save some money, and I knew that um, coming into this year, I was going to have to be saving up right around this time, and the time hunting season rolls around. So I'll probably go on a good rotation of trips, but nothing that wild, which means in 2 to 3 years, we've got some crazy shit that we're going to have to do. And we'll revamp maybe another episode of this podcast and have some
Yeah.
more stuff to talk about too.
Yeah, I hope to have some more crazy stories 2 years from
Yeah,
now. That's the
yeah,
that's the point of life, right? Just acquiring
absolutely.
crazy stories.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Ethan, it's a blast to talk to you as always, and it was awesome to have you on here. Where can anyone follow up with some of the crazy things that you got going on?
The only thing I have is an Instagram. It's just my name, Ethan, and then underscore my last name, Escue. Um, I don't post a lot on there. I typically only post from adventures, basically, so hunts and backpacking or fishing trips. So if you want to see any pictures from any, I've got some pictures posted from multiple of the things that I talked about today and a bunch of other stuff and a bunch of dead critters on there. So yeah, that's the only place you'll be able to find me.
Well, that sounds like, again, right up the alley of me and probably a lot of the listeners out there too. So, yeah, really appreciate you being on here. And, well, thank you everyone for listening this far and hope you have a great night.
Thanks, Jacob.